Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. Today I'm sharing the cards I made using Paper Rose's Floral Bliss 1.0 6x6 paper collection. This is a beautiful paper collection and so easy to make simple cards. One side of the paper has the floral design and then the opposite side has a coordinating watercolor look. So here's an example with the first card. It's the same paper, I just used the opposite side for this stitched circle die cut. This is a great collection if you need some quick and simple cards, and I love the designs, they're just beautiful. For my first card, I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 557, and I am changing this sketch up a bit. Instead of the star, I decided to have that stitched circle die cut. I used some liquid adhesive to adhere this circle in place, flipped over that panel and trimmed off the extra. That way it's flush to the right side of the card. Then I layered this panel on some blue cardstock. All of my cards in this video are American Standard A2 size, so 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I decided to add a die cut image inside the circle. This is Paper Rose's Elena butterfly die, and I cut it out from some iridescent cardstock, so it's super sparkly. I only put liquid adhesive underneath the body of the butterfly, that way the wings could still pop up. I'm adding the sentiment, "It's your birthday," and this is from Paper Rose's All Occasion sentiment sheets. They sell a large variety of different sentiment paper packs. These are great when you don't feel like stamping. To finish off the card, I'll add a few clear enamel dots, one in the upper right-hand corner and two to the left of the butterfly. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 6. I used different papers and different sentiments for the other cards. There are so many beautiful colors in this paper collection, it was hard for me to choose a favorite floral design. I was thinking of just making a few cards with this collection, but I kept making cards and before I knew it, all of the paper was gone. So this is a great collection, I highly recommend it. Now moving on to card design number 2. This sketch is from Freshly Made Sketches, it's number 500. I have some more beautiful floral paper, using that for the background, and I'm using the opposite side for this 1 7/8 inch strip that goes on the left side of the card. Layer everything on a bluish purple cardstock. I'm a big fan of using solid cardstock for my layers, but you could use the opposite side of the floral paper for your matted layers as well. This purple would work perfectly. Put some ATG tape on the back and put my card front onto a card base. For my cardstock layers, I usually add an additional 1/8 of an inch to the measurements listed on the sketch. Unless I want a wider border, then I would add 1/4 of an inch. For the image on the card, I'm using 2 of the Wildflower dies by Paper Rose. I believe this is number 3 and number 6. I cut them out from some purple glitter cardstock that I just have on hand. I'm putting some liquid adhesive on the back and adhering them onto that purple panel. Then I'll place my acrylic block on top for some extra weight to let that glue adhere. Once those are all in place, I can add my sentiment. I'm using another cut apart from the All Occasions sentiment sheets. Before adhering it in place, I will add some scrap pieces of cardstock and also a scrap piece of the pattern paper on the right side of the sentiment where it goes off of that purple panel. That way everything will be at the same level. I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the right of those wildflowers. For a final finishing touch, I decided to add a couple of sequins in the upper right-hand corner. And these are some sequins I've had for years. I have some tiny glue dots to adhere those in place. And I'm trying to get them in a nice, straight, even row. So there is my finished card, and this time I made 9 different cards. I have 3 different pattern papers and just made 3 of each. I did use different sentiments. It's always nice to have a variety of cards on hand. I also kept the cards nice and flat. I'll be donating most of the cards I made in this video to a local charity, and they prefer to have the cards nice and flat so they don't have to pay any additional postage to mail them. Now moving on to card design number 3. At this point in the video, I don't have any more full sheets of the 6x6 paper. I just have some paper scraps. I'm using some white shimmer cardstock for the background of the card. Wanted to add a little more detail, so I used Paper Rose's Hand Stitching 2 embossing folder. I love this design. Layer it on some blue cardstock and then add my card front onto a card base. Then using the Sandra's Quilt Block die set, I cut out lots of little pieces using the pattern paper scraps. I decided to use just the watercolor side of the pattern paper for all those little strips. I cut out the frame from some blue cardstock. I'll flip it over and add some double-sided tape to the back side. That way I'll be able to inlay all of those tiny quilt pieces and not have to deal with messy liquid adhesive. I don't need very much tape since it is a fairly small quilt die cut piece. So now I'll flip that piece over and inlay all of my little quilt pieces. Most of the paper scraps were left over from the first set of cards, so I really only have the 3 colors to work with. But I think the pink, blue, and the teal, kind of a green color, look really pretty together. I made several other cards, so I already planned out the pattern for all of the pieces. I didn't want 2 of the same color touching, and I think having the 3 colors is a really nice balance. I did have a little bit of the double-sided tape going off the edge, so I just used my scissors and trimmed that off. Now I'll remove the release paper from the back. It's hard to see in the video, but there's some teeny tiny gaps between the quilt pieces and the frame, and I don't want that white showing through from the background of the card. So I'm adding a piece of the same blue cardstock on the back side. I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back of this piece and adhere it to the upper portion of the card, trying to get it nice and straight. I'll put my acrylic block on top, let that adhere for a few moments. I cut out the sentiment thanks using Paper Rose's Hugs, Thanks, Hello Chunky Script die set. It's one of my favorites. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it underneath that quilt square. And just for a little extra detail on the card, I cut a very thin strip of the blue cardstock and I'll glue it underneath the sentiment. So it doesn't go all the way across the panel. I think it's about 3 3/4 of an inch wide. And again, I'll place my acrylic block on top to let that glue adhere. So very simple card, but I think it has a lot of lovely detail with the quilt and that embossed background. With the pattern paper scraps, I was able to make a total of 9 of the quilt cards. Now moving on to card design number 4, and this is my final card design. At this point, I really only have a few pattern paper scraps left over. And I should have showed them, but I was busy getting all my cards prepped before recording this video. Doing basically the same as the last card. This time I used a stitched rectangle die before cutting out that white panel, layered it on some black cardstock, and then again on some blue cardstock. I'll add some ATG tape to the back of this panel, put my card front onto a card base. Now with all of those leftover pattern paper pieces, I used Paper Rose's Stitched Heart die, cut out 6 of them, and I decided to have some of the floral design along with that watercolor design. Put some liquid adhesive on the back, adhere the bottom 2 hearts down first, trying to get them nice and evenly spaced. I will have a little gap between that row and the middle row since I'll be adding a sentiment above this bottom row. So I have another of the sentiment cut aparts for this card with Heartfelt Sympathy, cutting some fishtails on both ends. Then I'll add some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the card. So very simple card design, and I'm also keeping this card nice and flat. So once that sentiment's in place, I can start adding the rest of my hearts. So trying to follow with that very bottom row of hearts to get everything lined up correctly. I think this card would look really pretty to pop up those hearts, but since I wanted nice flat cards, I decided to glue them all down instead. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 2 using the pattern paper scraps that were left over. This is a great design for finishing off the last of those pattern paper scraps, or you could use solid cardstock as well. I think it would be fun to use stars. I've used circles before, lots of other options. Here are all the pattern paper scraps that I have left over, just 4 small pieces. I'll be adding it to my scrap box of the year. At the end of the year, I'll be pulling out that box and attempting to make a few more cards. I did not keep track of how many sheets of solid cardstock I used since I wasn't planning on finishing the entire paper pad right away. I did make a total of 26 cards using Paper Rose's Floral Bliss 1.0 6x6 paper collection. I love this paper collection. It was so easy to create lots of quick cards that are still beautiful. I do have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products I used in this video. Paper Rose is located in Australia and they do ship their products internationally, but you can also purchase them here in the US, and I do have links for both locations in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.